Twin suicide bombings rock Maiduguri, kill 3 and injure others.
Death toll in Uyo church building collapse rises to 27.
President Buhari felicitates with Muslims at Eid al-Maulud, urges reflection on the challenges of the country.
And today on Good Morning Nigeria, we focus on the Rivers legislative rerun elections, plus the election outcomes in Ghana and the Gambia.
Well, the last couple of weeks in Africa could rightly be said to be a season of elections. We had elections in the Gambia, Ghana, and back home here, there was the Rivers rerun elections.
And of course, Rhoda, we also have to add to that the governorship election that took place in Ondo State, and also in September, the governorship election that took place in Edo State. Now, while the other elections held as scheduled, the Rivers rerun election had suffered, postponement in the past due to security concerns. Now, the elections in the past had taken place in 2015, but of course, that was during the general elections, and on account of various judicial decisions by the election petition tribunals, the elections were annulled. Of course, it's also witnessed the incumbent the president losing his office to the current president, Muhammadu Buhari.
And of course, the court-ordered Rivers legislative rerun elections are actually well beyond the time the court had fixed. At stake were 3 senatorial, 8 House of Representatives, and 10 state constituency seats. Considering the verbal warfare that ensued between the major political parties in the period leading up to the elections and the fears that these evoked, the election passed off largely peaceful.
Well, security presence was massive, and that, of course, was for an election that took place in only one state, that is Rivers. Drones were said to have been used in the monitoring of the polls, but then there were reports of violence and snatching of election materials in some places, but certainly not on the scale that was anticipated. On the contrary, that's to say that going over to the West African sub-region, Ghana and the Gambia held their national elections that also passed such huge fears and challenges.
Well, where there's a serious challenge right now is probably the Gambia, where the incumbent, after publicly conceding to his opponent, is now having a rethink. In fact, the incumbent, Yahya Jammeh, publicly rejected the election outcome, but expectedly the international community has been quick urging him to have a rethink. So Good Morning Nigeria today will focus its radar on the Rivers legislative rerun election, as well as the elections of Ghana and the Gambia. I'm Rhoda Albo, and thank you for joining us on Good Morning Nigeria today, the very first for the week, and it's of course a public holiday. Not for us. I think to say that.
That's why we are here. That's why we are here. Of course, we thank our viewers for tuning to us at this time. As we just indicated in the case of the Gambia, there would appear to be a rollback of the earlier concession made by Yahya Jammeh. On the other hand, John Mahama of Ghana has already, of course, considered defeat and said, look, listen, the opponent in the election, Nana Akufo, had won the election, hands down, nothing else to contest. So Ghana moves on. Similarly, we had that in Nigeria in 2015. So the only sore thumb, of course, and this is crucial, it's in the Gambia. It's a small country in West Africa, surrounded on all 3 sides by Senegal. The only outlet it has, of course, is on the Atlantic Ocean. We'll be taking on that issue one more time in the course of this program. Once again, my name is Kingsley Osadolo, and I join my colleague Rhoda Albo in welcoming you to this edition of the program, as always reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We'll have our regular companion segments. In the meantime, we are going over to the newsroom, and our newscaster this morning is Samuel Obunde. Hi, Sam.
Hi, Kingsley and Rhoda. Ida Mulud. Good morning, Nigeria. I am Samuel Obunde. 2 explosives went off by Monday Market in Maiduguri, the Borno State capital, Sunday morning, killing the suspected 2 female suicide bombers and injuring several other persons. The explosions occurred before the commencement of trading activities in the area.
IED. And then they came from the direction of Bonge. Then on arriving in the vicinity of Ekalmi roundabout, the one with the 2 suicide bombs exploded. Then within her immediate vicinity, about 17 persons dropped injured.
27 persons have been officially confirmed dead in the collapse of the uncompleted Reina's Bible Church building in Uyo, the Akwa Ibom State capital. The Commissioner for Health, Akwa Ibom State, Dr. Dominic Ukpong, who gave the figures, dispelled the rumor that some state government officials are among the casualties.
None of our commissioners has passed on. We have some of them who were injured, but they are stable. They are receiving the proper treatment. I've actually discharged 2 this morning.
Normalcy is gradually returning to Madagali town after the twin bomb blasts that claimed 36 lives and left many injured.
Taking the insurgency, which now they have reduced them to 0 and minimum level. But what is running now is our people, the civilians themselves, have to be very vigilant. They have to seriously know who is talking to them, who is around them, so that you know who is your neighbor.
An early morning fire has razed a popular supermarket in Benin City, Phil Hallmark.
This is the only one we have. This is like you said, this is the largest super mall we have in the States. And for this sort of incident at this time of the year, it's a catastrophe. I've asked for a detailed report and investigation on this. Every public building, every place where we are going to have a lot of traffic and Christmas activities must have a fire plan, a fire disaster plan.
APC candidate Senator Magnus Abbey has been declared winner of Saturday's senatorial rerun election for Rivers South Senatorial District. The result was announced by INEC Senatorial District Collation Officer, Professor Gideon Onekurusi.
Magnus Negi Abbey, APC, 125,938. Olaka Johnson Nwogu of PDP pulled 25,394 votes. That Magnus Ngei Abbey of APC, having satisfied the requirements of the law and scored the highest number of votes, is hereby declared the winner and is returned elected.
6th Division Nigerian Army Port Harcourt has debunked allegations of killing and mass arrest by soldiers in Tai, Ogoni and Gukana local government areas during Saturday's legislative rerun elections in Rivers State. A statement by the General Officer commanding 6th Division, Major General Kasim Abdul Karim, described the allegation made by some respected politicians as false and aimed at causing disaffection between the division and the general public. The statement adds that soldiers only provided security to prevent miscreants from hijacking the election process. President Muhammadu Buhari has felicitated with Muslims as they mark yet another Eid Maulud, saying it is another opportunity for pausing, taking a deep breath and reflecting on the current realities before the country. He says the celebration of the birth of the great prophet is important, as through his teachings on peaceful living, tolerance, sobriety, generosity, sacrifice, honesty and wisdom, the nation has gained immensely in building a harmonious and prosperous society. Also, Senate President Bukola Saraki has urged Muslims to imbibe the injunctions of Prophet Muhammad on humility, gratitude and charity towards one another. In a statement by his special advisor on media and publicity, Yusuf Olaini Yonu, Senator Saraki urged Nigerians to, irrespective of their faith, use the Eid al-Mawlud to practice Prophet Muhammad's precepts of piety, tolerance, justice, and peaceful coexistence within their communities in the collective effort to overcome the current national challenges. In the same vein, Speaker, House of Representatives Yakubu Dogara has also felicitated with Muslims on the 2016 Eid Mawlud. A statement from his Special Advisor, Media and Public Affairs, Turaki Hassan, indicates that the Speaker advises Muslims to use the occasion to imbibe and promote the virtues of humility, love, harmonious and mutual coexistence which the Prophet of Islam exemplified. He noted that as the celebration coincided with almost the end of the year 2016, Muslims and Nigerians as a whole should use the unique opportunity to offer special prayers for the unity, progress and prosperity of the country. The inaugural meeting of the Northwest Executive Committee of the All Progressives Congress APC has ended in Dutse, Jigar State, passing a vote of confidence on the leadership of President Muhammadu Buhari.
We are addressing security challenges, the economic downtown, the meltdown that we are facing, the recession.
A lot of devices have been put in place where salaries are being paid, pension is being paid, economic activity is being funded, particularly in the agricultural sector.
Members of the National Assembly have been appealed to by this body to continue to support President Muhammadu Buhari's programs. The budget that is likely to be brought or submitted to the National Assembly next week, we have urged members to continue to support and accept the proposals in the budget.
The essence of Christmas was brought to the fore at the 2016 service of 9 lessons and Christmas carols held at the National Christian Center, Abuja. The service featured praise worship and rendition of hymns and carols. Christians and Nigerians at large are also reminded of the significance of the birth of Jesus Christ to the world, which is a demonstration of God's love to mankind as encapsulated in the 9 lessons. The event was organized by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, the Federal Radio Corporation of Nigeria, FRCN, and the Voice of Nigeria, VON. The service was attended by prominent Christians as well as members of other faiths. That's the news. Good Morning Nigeria continues shortly with Rhoda and Kingsley after the break.
If you hear a bomb explosion or gunshots of an active shooter, that might be a terror attack. At such times, always remember 3 action words: run, hide, report. Don't try to run towards the terror scene to save the situation, because there might be a second bomb blast or another attack. Run far away and take cover. Make sure you are safe first. Yes, it is in our nature to sympathize over the hurt, but remember, only trained personnel can help in such situations. When in a secured environment, promptly call relevant authorities and help will come. For anonymous reporting, call 09630-3250-5 or 0813-2222-106. If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
People think it's the ever-changing weather during Harmattan that makes them sick. Actually, it's the germs. Dettol protects from up to 100 illness-causing germs, including flu.
Does your antiseptic liquid kill the germs that cause flu, diarrhea, typhoid? Dettol does. Dettol provides 10 times more protection versus leading competition. So why take a risk with your loved ones?
In the heart of Abuja is Barcelona Hotels, a hotel that satisfies your every need. Our rooms are exquisitely furnished with state-of-the-art deco, top-notch room service, and our restaurant and bar. Ooh la la.
Sounds good to me.
Our halls are spacious and affordable for your meetings and special occasions. A fully equipped gym and laundry services are at your disposal.
I'm very happy about that.
Feel the thrill at the Barcelona Rooftop Restaurant and Garden with an amazing 360 degrees view of Abuja and an attractive lighting display at night for your relaxation and pleasure while enjoying sounds from our live band.
Yay!
Totally awesome. Treat yourself to these and much more at Barcelona Hotel, located at number 23, Blantyre Street, off Ademola Adetokunbo Crescent, Wuse 2, Abuja. Dial 0814-137-5819
or 0700 Barcelona.
For more info and bookings.
Email info@barcelonahotelsnigeria.com.
Barcelona Hotels, serving our guests the best way.
Introducing the new 5 Alive Pulpy Orange.
Where is the pulp? The pulp. Where is the pulp? Where is the pulp?
Taste the goodness of real orange pulp in every gulp.
Where is the pulp?
The new 5 Alive Pulpy Orange, now in your neighborhood.
All right, welcome back. You're still watching Good Morning Nigeria on the NTA. Now, let's talk business. In an effort to boost prices, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, and non-OPEC producers have agreed to cut oil output as experts say PPP can make Nigeria a maritime hub in the West African sub-region. Let's get more details now from our business correspondent, Joy Uzo.
Ministers from the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, and 11 ministers from non-OPEC producing countries at a historic meeting Saturday agreed on 558,000 cuts from non-OPEC members in a global deal to boost prices. OPEC maintains its decision made on 30th November 2016, where it decided to take out 1.2 million barrels per day out of its own production. By this decision of non-OPEC producers, it is only 2,000 barrels left of the target of 1.8 million barrels. Watchers in the sector say OPEC and non-OPEC countries at the meeting were responsible for 55% of global outputs. Their joint reduction would account for about 2% of global oil supply. This is the first time the two groups will be coming together to address the stability in the global price of crude by reducing supply gluts. This agreement takes effect from January 1, 2017. So far, there has been significant gradual rise in the price of crude since the November 30th OPEC meeting. The Director General, Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency, NIMASA, Dakuku Peterside, says that Nigeria can become the maritime hub in the West African sub-region if public-private partnership PPP model is utilized in providing adequate maritime infrastructure for the sector to thrive. Peterside identified this approach as a necessary step that is capable of unlocking the vast opportunities in Nigerian maritime industry to enhance optimum productivity. He stressed that given Nigeria's strategic location, population, and volume of trade in the African region, what the country needs to become a major hub of maritime activities is strategic investment in infrastructure for the maritime industry. The NIMASA boss says that can be achieved through a PPP model so as to address infrastructure deficit and optimize local content development. Lastly, a quick look at closing figures from the Nigerian Stock Exchange for Friday, December 9. With business news, I am Joy Uzo.
All right, Joy Uzo, thank you very much there for the business package on Good Morning Nigeria. Up next for us now is a review of the headlines in some of today's newspapers.
All right, you're on to the newspaper review segment. Our regular newspaper review by Toybe is unavoidably absent, so myself and Kingsley will just go ahead with the review. Would like to begin with the Nigerian pilot. And on the Nigerian pilot, just below the nameplates, Maulud Dogara preaches love and peace. That's on page 4. And also on page 4, I absolutely suffered racism in office. says President Barack Obama. I absolutely suffered racism in office. And the lead story on the Nigerian pilot this morning, Rivers rerun, confusion, suspense trail results. And with 2 riders there, 3 credible elections dead under Buhari, APC. And that's a statement credited to Fayose, and military interference alleged. All right, now let's go to the foot of the paper just below the picture story. How aid died saving Governor Udom in church collapse. How aid died saving Governor Udom in church collapse. Commissioner, spokesman, others still in critical condition. And on page 6, you can read up again, Boko Haram hits Maiduguri. On page 4, shave your beard or no communion, church tells members. And UN scribe urges nations to step up fights against corruption. That's on page 9. And finally, aftermath of poll results, Gambian President Jammeh heads to court. Those are the stories trending on the front page of the Nigerian Pilot this morning.
All right, let's take the Daily Trust newspaper as our next for a review of the headlines. Now, below the name flag, you have 2 headlines. New UN Secretary General to be sworn in today. Details of the story on page 5. And rerun, that's the kicker. APC wins Rivers Southeast Senatorial District. Details of that story on page 37. But the list story is on the economy. Buhari 2017 budget will end recession. 2017 budget will end recession. And below the photograph on the front page there are 3 other headlines. Nigerian engineers build power generating machine. That's on page 3. And on page 4, Adamawa malls ban on hijab at flashpoints. And federal government to get competent investor for Ajaokuta state plan. Details of that story can be found on page 13. Now, let me also take the blueprint very quickly. Blueprint has the following. Malud, Dogara, Okowa, and others urge peace. But the list stories on politics says Sheriff blackmails appeal court judges. That's according to McCarthy. And 2 writers. Judgment will cure misgivings. That's according to Sheriff. Take charge now, Chieftain tells Jonathan. And also there on the front page of Blueprint, 3 million workers lost jobs to privatization. That's attributed to Ajero. Details on page 17. And 4.36 trillion naira property, 40,000 lives lost to insurgency and others. ECOWAS donates $1.4 million to IDPs. That's on page 6 in greater detail. An environment minister to become UN deputy scribe. Details of that story on page 9. And federal government launches 13 billion naira mortgage refinancing for civil servants. And amidst violence, APC wins Rivers Southeast Senatorial District. That's on page 5.
All right, now on the leadership, just below the nameplate, 100 billion naira disease depositors fund trapped in banks. 100 billion naira disease depositors fund trapped in banks. And the lead story, Rivers rerun, APC's Magnus Abbey wins senatorial seats, 2 policemen killed. Rivers rerun, APC's Magnus Abbey wins senatorial seats and 2 policemen killed. I think that's the major headline on the leadership this morning.
All right, the Authority newspaper is next for us now. Above the nameplate of the Authority newspaper, we have a kicker that says Southern Kaduna killings. Senator and Alaibo demand probe of El Rufai's revelation. That's on page 4. Also on page 4, Nigerian leaders condole with Udom over Akwa Ibom church tragedy. And Glow CAF Awards, Iwobi and Iheanacho, as well as Amagbemi, make final shortlist. But the list story says how Adoke aborted U.S. return of $2 billion Abacha loot. With a rider, ex-AGF hits Nigeria. That's according to an American court. The front page photograph for the Authority, you can see the cranes there lifting the collapsed structure in Uyo. And it says emergency workers clearing the debris at the collapsed church building in Uyo. That was at the weekend. Now, the second lead story says Magnus Abe wins as APC sweeps Rivers rerun polls. Now, those are the headlines from the front pages of the papers that we have this morning. Rhoda, that's what we got. But the tragedy in Uyo really was one that it dominated the headlines, of course, from yesterday when the papers first came out, and then, of course, continuing this morning. No fewer than 27 persons dead. It's a big shame. It's a big loss.
Indeed, a very, very big loss to the people of Akwa Ibom State and indeed Nigerians. Lots of people there, lots of families. Not a good one, but we hope that as time goes on. Of course, the governor has said that they'll go, inquiries are being made as to what really happened on that day.
That's right. The contractor, there's been an arrest order placed on the contractor handling the project. My only concern immediately is, why would you hold such, a service in an uncompleted structure or a structure that is still under construction? It's unfortunate it's happened, but their souls rest in peace. That's the much, of course, we can take for our newspaper review segment. We move on, as we indicated, we'll be discussing the Rivers rerun elections. We'll also be taking on the Ghana presidential elections, as well as the rollback of the Gambia presidential election. Now, the much postponed Rivers legislative rerun elections took place at the weekend, although not without some challenges. Now, to proceed our discussion on that subject matter, our correspondent, Oyemi Ajayi, put together this background.
The Rivers State rerun election, which was held in 3 senatorial districts, 8 federal constituencies and 10 state constituencies at the weekend, actually first took place during the general elections in 2015, but were nullified by the judiciary. The latest rerun is coming after other earlier attempts to hold it failed due to security concerns or was declared inconclusive, as was the case last March, with INEC claiming that the election was characterized by violence, abduction of INEC ad hoc staff, and snatching of election materials. The weekend's latest rerun was reported to have been generally peaceful in many places, with cases of violence and irregularities in some other places.
Perfect exercise, the cases of late arrival of materials. There are also some security challenges.
It's so far very satisfactory. The turnout's encouraging, and I think what we expected it will be.
This is in spite of the heavy security presence for the rerun elections, with drones used to monitor the elections.
The part of this case is that, look, even when ballot papers are hijacked, even when anything is hijacked, you cannot use it.
There were also reports of the late delivery of voting materials to some units, confirmed by INEC officials.
All right, so thank you very much, Oyemi Ajayi, for that background report on the just concluded Rivers rerun elections. But then we have with us in the studio to discuss the Rivers rerun. We'll begin with that. Let's welcome to our studios the Deputy Director Public Publicity INEC, Mr. Nick Dezan. Good morning.
Good morning, Nigerians.
Always a pleasure to have you join us on the program.
Thank you very much.
All right, we also have with us in the studio the Force Public Relations Officer, Deputy Commissioner of Police, Don Auna. Thank you for coming on the program this morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, also in our studios here, we have the Chairman, Partners for Electoral Reforms, and that's Izinwa Nwagu. It's a pleasure to have you join us on Good Morning Nigeria this morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
All right, gentlemen, we also have joining us from our Kaduna Network Center at this time, Mr. Festus Okoye. Of course, is a very familiar face. He will be with us in the course of the discussion of the various topics that we're handling this morning. Mr. Festus Okoye, legal practitioner, a pleasure to have you on Good Morning Nigeria today.
Thank you and good morning. Thank you.
Okay, well, let's begin this conversation, gentlemen. First, if there's some chest beating by INEC, what, in your opinion, is your assessment of the rerun elections in Rivers? Is INEC satisfied with what went on? And if so, how come we don't have the full results as at this morning?
Well, let me say that relative to the rerun elections we conducted on the 19th of March 2016, the elections that we conducted this time were better, in terms of the atmosphere for the conduct of the elections. But certainly there were incidents. On election day, we recorded not less than 42 incidents. But the major flashpoints are LMA, Akokuturu, Kana, Gokana, and Eche. And because of that, we could not conclude the elections in one or two of these high-risk areas. And we are even looking at the prospect of concluding the elections in Eche today. And we made attempts yesterday to conclude the elections in Akokuturu. On election day, we had serious security challenges in Akokuturu, as a result of which we could not conduct the elections. There were dynamite explosions and gunshots, as a result of which we could not deploy and conduct the elections there. But subsequently, we had a meeting with all the stakeholders, and we were all agreed that we could go back and conduct the elections there. So as we speak now, only one senatorial district has been declared, and 9 other federal and state constituency elections have been declared. So to that extent, I think that relatively and compared with what we had on Saturday, 19th March 2016, it's an improvement, but I think that the situation could be said to be Sisyphean. It could be said to be frustrating, and it could be said also to, it tends to give you a sense of repeating something that is negative, a sense of what the French would call déjà vu.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Nick Dazank, Deputy Director Public Publicity, INEC. But then, PRO Donawuna, you just listened to Mr. Nick Dazank, pockets of violence there. Considering the level or the way that you prepared, of course, we had you last week or so, and you told us about your preparation for this rerun. Looking at the way that you prepared, how would you assess the elections? Would you say it was successful? Would you?
Thank you very much. If you do a comparative analysis of what you used to have in Rivers and what prevailed on Saturday, certainly it has been a huge success. Yes, there are isolated cases of refractions of the law, which we were on top of it, and we did assure our INEC that we are ready. You see, there's a between INEC and the security agency, sometimes there's some all I call not being sure, not sure, and rest of they need a lot of convincing. You see, sometimes a son of a gun doesn't mean that there's a risk in life. Some people use that as a scare tactics. And when we assess such risk, we tell you, no, you can go ahead. Those are things that should not bother you. So if you take a comparative analysis of what generally is compared in Rivers, we had a very relatively peaceful election, and we're still on top of it, because when you're analyzing the circuit of election, you look at the build-up during the election and after the election. So there were issues of violence, but they were not enough to stop the election, because some people are hell-bent in doing the wrong thing, irrespective of your massive deployment, irrespective of your assets deployment, irrespective of what you have done, irrespective of stakeholder collaboration. Some people are bent. So like I said, when it comes to violence, when it comes to disruptive attitudes, the percentage is very infinitesimal, which we can handle, and we are handling them. And the idea is so concerned that Rivers cannot have that label of a violence state. Rivers is not violent. It's just a few individuals who want to make it violent.
What's your reaction to reports about fatalities? I mean, there's some accounts that at least 2 police officers lost their lives in the course of the election. What is the correct position?
No, yes, we have confirmed a police officer, a DSP lost his life. IGP is very, very worried, and he has instituted a very high-powered investigative team to determine the circumstances in which the officer lost his life, whether it's a shared criminal enterprise or election-related. So we lost a life which paid the supreme price. This is what the police have always undergone all over the years, not just only elections, because we are first responders, because we are the one who is trying to process democracy. The Nigerian police is processing democracy. We're the lead agency, but we are doing a lot to ensure that nobody else has lost his life. The officer who lost his life, the family has been contacted. We're doing a lot to ensure that he not die in vain. Like I said, the IGP has instructed a very high-powered investigative team to unearth the circumstances surrounding his death.
So you're saying just one officer was lost?
Yes, you see, in security parlance, when you don't see a corpse or you don't see someone is missing, so one is missing, one is dead, one is missing.
Okay.
All right, DCP and the First Public Relations Officer, thank you very much. Now, just before we bring in Nwangu into the conversation, that's Nwangu, who is with us here at the Abuja studios. We also at this time like to welcome another guest. Is joining us from our Port Harcourt Network studios is Andrew Efemini. He's a professor of philosophy at the University of Port Harcourt. Professor Efemini, a pleasure to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
It's my pleasure too to be here. Listeners, welcome.
All right. Again, before we come to you, we earlier introduced Nwangu. Nwangu, what's your take on the Rivers supplementary elections? Has it met, the acceptable standard for credible and peaceful elections?
Well, for Rivers, I think it has to be a different kind of standard. And that's because it had posted itself to be quite challenging. But if we do a stakeholder analysis, we'll say for INEC, Rivers for very bad reasons is a logistics nightmare. Logistics nightmare because truly and honestly speaking, when you compare the progress that has been made in terms of what we saw in Edo, in terms of what we saw in Ondo, the polls in many places couldn't start into almost 11 o'clock. And it is really not really essentially much more problem of INEC. It had to do with resistance by first the actors, the political actors, and the people they recruited to even move materials from place to place. In many places where we saw people parked in vehicles ready to go, and the driver just simply says it's not going anywhere. And so you had already the narrative of hate, the narrative of tension, the narrative of crisis that was built into that election had actually affected people's enthusiasm to effectively carry out their assignments. Even you could palpably touch the fear in the poll officials. The enthusiasm was not there. So it for me it became quite worrying that you couldn't open polls. Even where the materials from the rack centers where we were to sort out materials took 4 hours of engagement. You talk to this person, and then you just. So when we say it's successful to the extent that you can put a different kind of benchmark for Rivers. But I think that going forward, we need to begin to have a conversation about really whether, people want, in certain parts of this country, whether people want democracy or not. And what's painful is that in all of this is not about the people. Because the man who is throwing dynamite, the man who is shooting, is not a voter. The voter is determined. He has come out to vote. Extraneous influences are making it very difficult for those who have responsibility to cast their vote to do so. And it's for observers, it's for me and other people, I think it's really worrying.
All right, thank you very much, Eze Wagu, for your contribution. But then I'd like to get the views of Professor Andre Femini. You just listened to Eze Wa. He said that Rivers actually there should be a different standard, you know, and looking at it, he would term it as successful. From your perspective, how would you term this supplementary elections in Rivers?
Well, I am sure Nigerians would have expected a better election, in the sense that we have just confirmed that the police lost a senior officer and that one other person is missing. We also have reports of 1 or 2 deaths across the state. So once an election gets to a point where we are talking about loss of life, there should be very serious post-mortem of that process. I think that we cannot, in all fairness, expect that we continue to have this kind of elections, whether in Rivers State or in any part of the country for that matter. So, first of all, I think that the neutrality of electoral empire, in this case INEC, and the neutrality of security agents must in future be reviewed adequately. I say this because I am beginning to think that the political parties themselves may have to agree on the rules for conduct of elections and agree, or even on veto power, in terms of if they don't agree on the procedure, we don't hold elections. Otherwise, you will discover that it will be one party against the other party, and maybe the position of government through INEC and all that beginning to determine elections. I'm very interested in Nigeria matching the standard in Ghana. For a number of times now, we have seen change of governments in Ghana because they know that when they go to elections, it will count. So once elections lead to death, by my training, I'm not excited about such elections. Elections are not for counting people who have died. Elections are opportunity for citizens to enter into some kind of social contract with leaders who will come back and be accountable to them in terms of what they do and what they don't do. So I'm saddened about what we are doing, but I hope that we'll quickly learn from this and make progress.
Well, Professor Efemene is still with you. Today is a public holiday nationwide, but what is the mood like in Port Harcourt, the capital of Rivers State, this morning?
Driving around, because elections are not fully concluded, I can tell you that there's a bit of anxiety. I wish that the elections were concluded and all the results announced so that people's anxiety can calm down. I just listened to the INEC senior officer there saying that they are hoping to conclude those elections today also. Once those elections are concluded, people can then honestly think that Rivers State will, one way or the other, become an environment where they will feel free. Meanwhile, as every other public holidays, we are here. We're also watching all of you there. We are watching each other. I hope we survive the whole tension.
I mean, the viewers are watching you in the meantime because you're on the right side of our split screen. A question that we tried to address on the eve of the rerun elections last week is one I'm posing to you again. In the 80s, I'm sure you remember this, in the Second Republic, there was a common expression, bound to violence, often used to describe the Southwest. Why does it appear now that Rivers is bound to violence in the Fourth Republic?
Very serious question, I would say. If you ask me, I think that the problem is historic. It has a historical dimension to it. We have, in all honesty, not given the electorate the opportunity to vote for a long time. Those who know our politics here will tell you, for example, that the riverine areas used to influence elections because they were inaccessible. But in the era of elections now being conducted by INEC, they're able to access everywhere. We're beginning to see real politicking. And the militarization of the Niger Delta over time, which the facts are all known to us, has also started to impact on the intensity of politics. Who has access to Abuja? Who does not have access to Abuja? All those issues are beginning to create some kind of do or die kind of political experiences for our people. And getting out of it, I would imagine, would require some kind of political reform, basic political reform that creates inclusive kind of politics. This idea of winner takes all that is associated with presidential elections in Nigeria, where the political consciousness has not reached that level, where politics has not started to touch the lives of every Nigerian as it should, where access to power is more or less access to survival, then the political reform that we talk about must, as a matter of urgency, be in place. If you, for example, go through an election, I've advocated for two-party system, and you say the party that wins takes 60% or 70% of offices, the second party takes 40 or thereabout. Some kind of coalition kind of government as a constitutional direction for this country. I'm telling you, what you are seeing in Niger Delta will end. What I see in other parts of the country will end. But if we don't, looking at the pluralistic, multicultural, and the ethnocentric, centrifugal forces we have in this country, if we put all those together and think we can run an exclusive presidential kind of election in America, I am really worried about where we are going.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Efemini. But then, Mr. Nigdazan, we're looking at an election that was done in just some parts of River State. Considering that it was quite a small, area to cover, we still had issues of card reader failure. Why was this?
I don't think smart card reader failure featured prominently in this election. What featured prominently was violence, and this violence prevented us from deploying in time. I would like to respond to what Eze said, which is that perhaps for some areas we should use different benchmarks. We cannot afford to use different benchmarks for certain areas. The benchmarks must be the same. I think that in time past, like what the professor said, elections were difficult to conduct in certain areas, and people took advantage of the difficulties of these terrains to insist that elections should be conducted in manners as dictated by them. And I think that the time for that has passed. We cannot use other yardsticks for other areas and use different yardsticks for others. The yardsticks, the benchmarks must be the same. And they must accord with international best practices. We always insist, and I keep saying this, that look, the world has shrunk into a global village. Whatever we do in whatever small corner of this earth is subject to the scrutiny of all in almost real time. So we cannot begin to say that we'll conduct free, fair, and credible elections elsewhere using certain rigorous benchmarks, and then we relax the standards for certain areas. So we need to go back, reform the process, and also to decommission arms. Decommissioning means people surrendering the arms that they hit, instead of surrendering maybe the RPGs, the rocket-propelled grenades that they have hidden. They now surrendered machetes. So the time has come. It's a challenge for this country and the security agencies that in the aftermath of elections in some of these areas, we need to really go back and see how we can take back these arms. And I don't think it's peculiar only to rivers, because of the proliferation of arms based on the kinds of conflicts around the sub-region and even outside the sub-region. So we need to really go back and take back these arms, find ways of taking them back so that the environment for elections subsequently, will be there.
All right. Well, Nick, what's your reaction to allegations or insinuations that INEC at the collation centers was fending off party agents from observing the collation?
No, I don't think that allegation is correct. What we've been having is a situation where certain stakeholders are even preventing our staff, from conducting the elections. For example, it's part of the agreement we had in Akokuturu that we'll go back to conduct the elections. Certain people are now insisting that they will go and conduct the elections on behalf of INEC and make returns. And we say it is not possible. We cannot subscribe to that idea. So our resolve is that the standards we have set must be abided by all stakeholders. We cannot make we cannot exclude certain areas and say you'll be subjected to these standards, and then we now relax the standards for certain areas.
Well, the DCP, Don Awuna, but there were also reports in the media indicating that some of the security agents were, seen to have been collaborating with some miscreants, either in the snatching of ballot boxes or in the disruption of the exercise itself. What is the review by the security authorities of the conduct of their men and officers in the course of this rerun election?
From the policing perspective, that's absolutely untrue. It would appear that there are some people in River State that in their DNA is violence. No matter the arrangement you make, they are fault finders. You see, who are those security officers? Every security officer engaged in the election is identifiable. You are wearing tag, and your tag indicates the area you are going to operate. So, in the area of Android phones, in the area of IT, prove. Anybody can go to the market and wear a uniform and call himself a police officer. So, you see, the blame game continues. Like one guy just said, the conversation has to change. You see, no matter the massive deployment, no matter the risk analysis, no matter the assets deployment, no matter what you do, if there are some people who are determined, ab initio, to be violent-prone personality, especially gladiators, what can you do? There's always a gap in security. The massive deployment is not just because of one election. The massive deployment is because of the analysis, the historical analysis we have, the risk analysis we have done, and the stakeholders meeting what we agreed upon. The security could be ready. Are the stakeholders ready? The politicians, are they ready? Is INEC ready? Are the voters ready? The voters are ready. There are people whose interest is to accentuate and make that violence prevails. And those people are cancers in the system.
Are you suggesting, DCP Awuna, that massive deployment on the scale that we have seen in recent elections, including Rivers, that it's unnecessary?
It's not unnecessary. You see, people don't understand about security. The deployment you gather or you garner or you do for one election in a local area is also the same as you do in a general election. It's all about critical mass. So it takes just an individual to disrupt election in Nigeria. So when you have election restricted in a particular area, there is a high level of concentration, interest. Assuming you have a general election, everybody is at one corner of the country doing one thing or the other. So there is no interest. You could see the gravitation of politicians from other parts of the country to River State. When you have national election, do you have such gravitational pull or move? You wouldn't. So in security balance, the amount of energy you could use in conducting an election in a particular environment is equal to the same amount of energy you will use in conducting a general election. Let me do this analogy. If you want to cook a small pot of soup, the amount of heat that you use for that soup, if you agree with me, is also the amount of heat you may necessarily use to a bigger pot of soup.
We all function in the kitchen.
Yes.
Why are you directing your question? We function in the kitchen.
So what I'm saying is that the massive deployment is very necessary. One is part of a deterrence factor. It's assuring, it builds confidence, and it helps to process democracy, which is our primary duty. And we have done that in Rivers. And like I said, taking a very strong analysis and complete analysis of what you have found in previous elections. The Nigerian police have been engaged in elections in this country since 1929. And we have used all these elections as a learning curve. And we will continue evolving. Democracy is an evolving system. People should make sure that we do it right. And we are prepared to do it right.
All right, thank you very much, DCP Don Awuna. I'd like to bring in Ezenwa. Mr. Ezewa, you just listened to him. It appears that some people feel that, you know, with the amount of security that was deployed to River State, you know, we would have probably not have had the incidences that we had. We would have seen ballots snatching. To some people, it appears that, you know, that deployment was probably, you know, unnecessary. What's your take on that?
No, I think it's necessary only to the extent that it's effective. If it's not effective, then it is of no value if you deploy, because what I'm hearing from the DCP is that yes, we deployed, but people will do what they want to do, and I began to ask myself, what then did we deploy for? I need to be hearing about the number of people, such kind of people that he described that have been arrested and will be prosecuted, and that would inspire more confidence than having people all over the place. For Rivers election, there are two categories of security agents. There are those who, the military and the police, who behaved professionally, who understood the rules of engagement for elections, and there are those who manifestly were contractors, and they behaved in that manner and everybody saw them. Now, whether they are security men, those ones I'm talking about, you don't take carry arms to the polling units for whatever reason. I think it is known as a rule of engagement. Now, you saw many of those people within, and what's annoying is that they simply wear vests that are printed SAS, come in hill-up vehicles, you know, and we've continued to say, look, how do you tag a man who is wearing a black vest with his tag? He has no name tag. So he behaves in a manner, and people simply see SAS. If we had done anything in time past to make sure that there is a way to regulate these people who are not in uniforms, who carry arms all over the place, during elections, it will be easy to isolate them as not being whether. So in these instances, there are people manifestly who were going into polling units, preventing voters, snatching ballot boxes, and even beating up voters. It's so, and they are in uniforms, and so it is difficult for people who are watching, who are observing, to then isolate them and say, oh, they are not security, they are fake. And even if they were fake, what is the responsibility of the police, the security agencies? Is to maintain law and order. How many of those people who have been arrested, how many of them are going to be prosecuted as a result of that? So when secondly, when I was talking about a different benchmark, I think I was just pouring out my frustration that what we conducted in River State in very serious terms cannot be called elections. And I think I was just being nice in terms of trying to say, oh, why don't you have a different? You couldn't call that elections, because in many places the rules collapsed, broke down.
What kind of rules broke down on Saturday in the conduct of the rerun elections?
In places where I was, for instance.
Like where?
I was in Gokana, I was in Buri, I was in Kana, I was in Eleme. By 11 o'clock, materials had not come to, they had not left the rack centers. It was chaotic. You saw mass and mass of young people massing out, and even the security agencies had challenges getting out of that place. That's number one. In many places, there is a particular place where we were. The officials had set up the ballot, what do you call it, the ballot box. Two of the ballot boxes disappeared in between that place. Elections were held down, the crowd surged in, and then after a while, the ballot boxes reappeared. There are many places where the vehicle that brought the officials, 3 of the officials couldn't be found in the vehicle that left together at a particular point in time. These are processes, these are things that diminish us as a people in terms of our arrangements, of what we know INEC to do. INEC had overcome these logistics challenges. INEC had come to a point where we were up, advocating that, look, what we need to begin to focus attention is the attitude of the politicians. But what we saw in Rivers, in my view, was simply discretion. A lot of discretion came to play because of the objective conditions of the reality that they found themselves, which is that the actors, the political actors, made that environment very, very difficult to conduct election in its truest sense.
Nick Dazang, what's your reaction to this?
Yeah, to a large extent, what he's saying is correct, because in LMA, for example, we had instances of snatching of our materials. In fact, one of our staff was wounded in that place, and we couldn't start the elections in good time. We had similar reports from Gokana that he also mentioned. But like I said earlier on, we had 42 incidents, but these incidents were restricted to Akokutoro, Gokana, LMA, Eche. These were the high-risk areas where these incidents occurred. So to a large extent, the elections there were marked. In fact, like I said earlier on, we are going back to Eche today to conclude the elections. And yesterday, we made attempts to conclude the elections in Akokutoro. So to a large extent, what he's saying is correct. But these violence were orchestrated by some of the stakeholders on the ground. And where there is violence, there's no way that you can deploy, because you cannot put your staff in harm's way. And but for the intervention of the security agencies, perhaps we would not have conducted the elections in these areas at all. Because in Akokutoro, dynamites were being exploded by the second, and everyone took to his heels. So in that kind of circumstance, there's no way that the procedures can be adhered to. And we now had to retreat, and then later met with the stakeholders and agreed that we could go back and conduct the elections. In Boni, for example, some of our staff were held hostage. So when you are a hostage, there's no way you can conduct an election. So that is the reality in Rivers, but certainly it was better than what happened on Saturday, March 19th, 2016.
All right, thanks, Nick. We'll come back to you as well as to the first public relations officer, but just to indicate that we have some viewer reactions already, and the viewers have taken advantage of our Twitter handle. You can see it there on the left side of your screen at NTA GMA. We'll take some of those reactions now, and then we'll come back to our guests.
All right, the very first one is from Sani Michael in Mokaji. He says, it's a shame and a national embarrassment where we find ourselves politically in less than 2 years. Elections now won at gunpoint.
And we have this from Abishola 1988. That's the handle for that. It says, good morning to you all. How I wish the Nigerian police, could take those deaths seriously, just like the Nigerian army.
And this person tweets, security agents should maintain all forms of neutrality rather than allow themselves to be used by desperate politicians. It's a shame.
And Ifek Shisi has this tweet. No, I think one standard should be maintained. That's in reaction to what Ezewa Owagu said earlier, but it's also clarified that point.
All right, Ibrahim Madu Reggae tweets, sadly, what we had was a war between slavery and reality.
And Abishola again has this tweet. Please, I would like the Inspector General of Police to bring those killers to book. And with what I think of the killing, and with that, I think the killing of police officers will stop. I want the IGP to bring those killers to book. And with that, I think killing of police officers will stop. That's a tweet from Abishola 1988. Those are the tweets that we have in the meantime. Just before we go back to our Port Harcourt Network Center, DCP Awuna, what's your reaction to the comments made by Mr. Wangu? One, according to him, that you had persons who did not appear to be official security agents, who probably, according to him again, were contractors. And here they had access unstopped by those security agents who had legitimate duties on that particular occasion.
Well, I'm not going to join issues about that because I don't know where he was. From the report that I got from River State, and we were monitored from the first quarter here, all police officers, all security officers that were involved and engaged in this election were tagged. They had an ID card outside being in uniforms, and from my reports, nobody was allowed to be in the polling unit with arms because there was this what we call the circle model, the perimeter, the inner circle, and that the army, the other security agencies, and the police. So we had that model that worked very well. You see, issue of the areas that were a little bit violent, just like the Zanga said, the security intervened and election took place. See, in violence or in crime, there are three basic things: preventive, response, and detection. In that respect, of course, we have arrested 4 persons around that area and recovered 2 AK-47s. And those who have been arrested in this river election will be dealt with decisively.
You have arrested 4 statewide?
Yes, at this particular area, we arrested 4 people. Not at the polling unit.
Okay.
Not at the polling unit. Through our stop and search methodology, one of the crime reduction strategy, we arrested 4 and recovered AK-47 rifle from them. So if we have a report, it made mention of voters being manhandled. If a voter has been manhandled and they made an official report, to our report we have so far, no voter has come forward and said I was manhandled. And before the security officer, no voter has said I was manhandled. If there are skirmishes between voters arguing, those are challenges which you intervene. And we didn't intervene. It's because the security intervened. There was massive deployment that we have what we have today. And we should be able to say kudos to the security officer for what we have done. Taking using the past elections and index, what we have done is successful, and we expect to move forward from that. Let's use every step as a learning process, and I think the security in the River State is better than what we had before. And those who have found wanting must be arrested and apprehended and taken to court. So we are doing that.
Okay, well, thank you very much, DCP Awuna. I will come back to you. Professor Efemini at Port Harcourt Network Center. Again, that's the point I would like to return to, because what we're actually dealing with here is a post-mortem after the elections, after the certificates of return are issued, that, of course, life has to go on, governance has to go on. And if the violence remains latent or active, then the question persists. What is the role of senior citizens in the pacification of this hotbed?
Citizens, whether junior, senior, minors, are citizens. We want institutionalized reforms that are not hanged on individuals. Just listening to the senior officer there, I have a lot of sympathy for the police. I think that he now appreciates that if you bring 50,000 officers, it doesn't necessarily guarantee security. I would imagine that the way we are going, I would prefer to see cameras and recording of all electoral processes in place of the role of senior citizens. We saw when the former President Goodluck wanted to vote that the capturing machine failed, and the whole country saw it, and it was a national embarrassment. For all these elections, we have heard of minors voting, we have heard of all sorts of things. Cameras are modern instruments for exposing police, exposing the electorates, exposing INEC officials, exposing political parties. So any serious voting without recording should not be part of our electoral system. Just minor reforms of our electoral laws. We end all this drama we are doing here. If you vote, we see it. If you didn't vote, we see it. You see, with phones, you can do these things. So I personally want to see institutionalized reforms that convince the political parties, that convince the citizens that we can be a democracy. I have always taught my students that we have civilian government. We don't have a democracy. Democracy has several ideas: constitutionalism, rule of law, accountability, and free and fair election. Any single element of this that is diminished, you are very far from a democracy. Are we ideal on all these major elements? The answer is no. So I personally, I'm not excited that we have to bring policemen to come and be monitoring, policing. What are you policing? You are policing because the conditions and the rules for elections are in the first place not convincing to the electorates and maybe to the politicians. So if we are going to be doing this kind of thing as a pattern of living in this country and this pattern of governing ourselves, we are sending very dangerous message across the land and internationally. No investor comes to a society where political stability is not guaranteed. So I personally, as a scholar, think that the way out of this is very clear, and I'm convinced that you can change the voting habits of the average Nigerian without relying on big men They're not custodians of democracy. They are one man, one vote. So I am convinced that this postmortem should lead to reforms at the National Assembly, should lead to reform of the entire political system. Nigeria can be a democracy. So what are we doing?
All right, Professor Efemini, well, thanks a lot. I'm sure you're aware of the story of some CCTVs in some Nigerian cities. Those CCTVs collapsed almost immediately after they were set up. But that's a point to also deal with subsequently. But let's return to Nick Dazang. Nick Dazang, we asked you this question last week about what happened in previous elections, where some persons went to the polling stations and demanded first to see the result sheets and then to satisfy themselves that the result sheets were authentic before they could vote. There were video clips indicating that, again, that scenario played out in Saturday's election. How did INEC handle all of this? I mean, there were threats being issued to the polling officers.
Well, maybe under duress they were forced to do that, but we've always said that it is wrong for anyone to assume that he can demand to cite our materials before he votes. We are the custodians of these materials, and it's like saying that CBN gives you currencies that are fake. I mean, it's difficult to imagine that INEC that prints these materials can now afford to go out and give people materials that are not genuine. It's not possible. So the issue of demanding to cite sensitive materials does not arise. And we keep telling people that in each election, we keep putting security features in these sensitive materials, especially in areas like rivers where we anticipate challenges. We cannot use the same kinds of sensitive materials we had used in the past. So people should expect these changes, and when they occur, they should abide by our rules and guidelines. And it's not correct, even for our staff to subject themselves to this kind of demand, in quotes, by some individuals to cite the documents.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Nick Dazang. That's where we'll end this discussion. We'd like to say thank you very much for coming on Good Morning Nigeria today.
Thank you very much.
And also would like to say a very big thank you to the Force PRO, that's the Deputy Commissioner of Police, Don Awuna. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Also, Chairman, Partners for Electoral Reforms, Ezewa Wagu. Thank you for coming on the program. And would like to say a very big thank you to our guest from Pataka Network Center, that's Professor Andrew Efemini. Thank you for your thoughts and time this morning.
Thank you very much.
All right, we'll take a break now, and when we return, the Ghana and just the concluded elections in the Gambia will be our focus. We'll take a break now and we'll be back shortly.
Nigerians. Suicide bombers are not spirits. They are not ghosts. They are human beings like you and me. They live amongst us. They are your neighbors. They are your friends today, but terrorists tomorrow. So you must know your neighbor now. Security begins with you and me. Know your neighbor. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me.
If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Today, Ariel will show you how to save more in these tough times.
Wife's powder.
It's pretty good and money's tight.
But Ariel gives better cleaning with less powder.
Impossible.
Come with me.
Spaghetti sauce, chocolate drink.
For these tough stains, I'll need 1, 2, and just 1 handful of Ariel. New Ariel gives better stain removal with less powder.
That's real savings. Ariel removes tough stains better in 1 wash.
Nigeria joins the rest of the world in going digital. This means Nigeria is moving from analog terrestrial TV broadcasting to digital. Now, digital broadcasting gives you clearer pictures, crystal clear sound, and a chance for more channels and more shows to watch. Digital TV is a whole new experience for you and a rich harvest of digital gifts for the nation. Come aboard, Nigeria going digital. Coming to Abuja soon.
Hi guys, look how my baby Jamil has grown. And as they grow, there's a worry we all share, skin rash. Some use lotions or petroleum jelly, but I found what works for Jamil is Nigerian Pampers. It has built-in lotion to help protect his delicate skin and keep him dry. See you in the morning, Jam Jam. Good morning, happy Jam Jam. Dry and soft and no sign of a rash. Join many other moms and try Nigerian Pampers with lotion. Let's beat the rash.
All right, you're welcome back. But if you just joined us, it's Good Morning Nigeria, and we are reaching you on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We just discussed the Rivers rerun legislative elections, and as we indicated, we'll also be taking on the elections in the Gambia and Ghana. Now, both countries are English-speaking, and they are in West Africa. They had their own elections recently. Now, why the elections in both countries went well, generally, and in both cases, the incumbent president lost the election and conceded publicly. There's been a recent twist with President Yahya Jammeh of the Gambia, who has changed his mind, provoking a welter of reactions from the international community.
All right, we'll, however, begin the discussions with the Ghana elections first. And to do that with us is the High Commissioner of Ghana to Nigeria, His Excellency Williams Azuma Awindo Kani. Rige. Did I get that right?
You got it right.
Thank you very much. You're welcome to the program.
Thank you.
And also joining us for this discussion this morning from our Coordinate Network Center, we introduced him earlier, and that's Mr. Festus Okoye. He is a constitutional lawyer and a public affairs analyst. Thank you and welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
All right, we also have still with us in the studio here, Ezewanwagu, Chairman Partners for Electoral Reforms. Thank you for still staying with us. And our correspondent who monitored the elections in Ghana, and that's Mohammed Ali. Mohammed Ali, it's good to have you join us this morning. All right, Mohammed Ali, let's begin with you. You were in Ghana, and of course, you sent in reports for us. We took you live on various times last week. How did you see the election? How did it play out for you?
Actually, I was impressed with the Ghanaian election. So you know, I was there 5 days before the election, and
Definitely.
I covered some of the campaigns, and I was at the Electoral Commission where I saw the preparations, the deployment of electoral materials and things like that. And I also monitored the atmosphere generally in Ghana. People were looking forward to the election. Everybody wanted to vote, to make sure that their vote counts. Even the drivers attached to us were saying that we have to find a way of allowing them to vote on that particular day. So generally, the people were enthusiastic about the election, and they came out. Many of them, all the polling units I visited, there were a lot of people. You can't imagine that at a certain places, 2-3 hours before the votes were opened, some people were at the polling station as early as 4:30 a.m. when the polling votes were to be opened at 7 o'clock. So that is to tell you how enthusiastic they were, and they actually came out and voted, and it went fine. In order, there were some fears that things may not go right, but on that election, everybody was orderly, and everything went on fine.
All right, Muhammad Ali, thanks a lot. Again, we'll come back to you, but let's go to Festus Okoye. Festus Okoye, you were an observer in the Ghana elections. What were the key markers that you had in the course of your observation of the election?
Well, I think that I met Muhammad Ali at the ECOWAS election observer briefing in Accra. In relation to the Ghana elections, I think that the Ghanaian people have decided to demystify this whole concept of violent elections. The ordinary Ghanaian, the ordinary voters, are far, far ahead of the political class in terms of electoral maturity. And then if you also look at the instruments, the constitutive instruments for the conduct of the elections, you will see that Ghanaian elections or the electoral process in Ghana has come of age. One, during the elections, there was no restriction of movement. Shops opened. There was vehicular movement in and out of Accra. Some shops decided to open between 9 o'clock and 12 noon, and then allow some of their staff to go and vote, while others allowed their staff to go and vote, and then opened them much later. The second benchmark for me is the fact that the card reader in Ghana is slightly different and slightly perform much better than what we have in Nigeria. This is because the card reader reads the barcode on the voters register. The moment he reads the barcode on the voters register, the picture of the voter appears, and then the voter just appends his or her finger, one finger on the card reader, and then the voter moves on to the next stage. So it takes less than a minute for the card reader to perform his functions, and then everything goes on well. The third benchmark for me is the fact that people in penal institutions are allowed to vote. Prisoners register, and then they are assigned registration districts in the area where their facility is located. And I think that is also very fundamental. And one other thing I noticed is that the presiding officers in most of the polling units, especially in polling units where you have some voting points, they acted as more or less as supervisors. They were the ones granting interviews to observers and so on, and the electoral process was going on well. People really did not need any form of prodding for them to know what to do. The only places I saw some reaction in the polling units were places where somebody attempted to jump the queue. And the people resisted it and said, look, you cannot do that. You got to be orderly. You must go to the queue. I also noticed that senior citizens are accorded priority. The moment they come to the polling unit, they are isolated and they are allowed to vote, and they are allowed to go away. So I think that for me, what is important is that the Ghanaian people feel that their electoral process has come of age. And they also believe that in terms of whether the elections will be credible or not, that is taken for granted that the elections will be credible. And the only time I saw armed policemen or armed soldiers near the vicinity of the polling units was at the point of collation and counting. They just passed, some of them just passed through, and some of them just parked by the roadside and were minding their business. So I think that there are a lot of things we need to learn from the Ghanaian elections. And one of those is that the Ghanaian people believe that they do not need extra prodding for them to do or exercise their civil responsibility, and that they take it for granted that the elections will be credible, and that whoever loses in their election will definitely concede defeat. And I think that is a marked contrast to what we are seeing in this country, where election is akin to war. A situation where you do not even know whether election is taking place or election is not taking place. People are moving about, going about their normal businesses. Businesses are open, shops are open, banks are open. If you want to exercise your democratic franchise, you go and exercise it. If you do not want, you remain at home. But the truth of the matter is that if you look at the voter turnout, you will see that they recorded 68-point-something% in terms of voter turnout, which shows that the Ghanaian people attach fundamental importance to the electoral process and fundamental importance to the exercise of their franchise. And they believe that nobody can prevent them from exercising their franchise, and that the elections, for whatever reason, whether somebody likes it or not, that the elections will definitely be credible. So I think that is a huge difference from what I had my good friend Ezenwa talk about in relation to the Rivers election. Any Nigerian that went to Ghana to observe these particular elections and then comes back to this Rivers nonsense will definitely be depressed. And I think that I'm not proud of what is going on in Rivers, and I think that we have a lot of things to learn from the Ghanaian elections.
Well, Mr. Festus Okoye, thank you there for the points that you have raised. But how would you then situate the occurrence of one or two of the leading parties in the election seeking to declare their own candidates, presidential candidate, as winner, even before the formal concession of defeat or formal announcement of the results? Why did we have that level of anxiety about who might be the winner eventually?
Well, I think that, you see, before the elections, there was a lot of anxiety. Of course, the political parties and the politicians were raising the stakes in terms of the electoral viability, in terms of where they have what they call their World Bank. That is their major support. But most of those things you were seeing in the media did not fundamentally affect the Ghanaian voters. In the hotel where I was, the voters took it for granted that the elections will be credible and that the political parties and the politicians were only grandstanding. If you can also see that the false calls in relation to the elections were made by the media. The media followed the elections bumper to bumper, from polling unit to polling unit. And one other thing that you must observe is that the two leading political parties had their party agents in every polling unit. And those party agents were properly trained. You can see some of them had printed cards where they were recording the number of people that voted. And the presiding officers and the Electoral Commission also acted in a very, very transparent manner. In other words, what they did is that the moment the presiding officers and the electoral materials and the electoral officials arrive at the polling units, they sit down with the political parties and audit what has been brought to the polling unit to make sure that everything is correct. The presiding officers had gloves because they did not want to tamper with the ballot papers in case there's an electoral challenge. They had rulers. Every material was complete at the polling units. And there was no complaint in most of the polling units where I observed. So I think that the Ghanaian electorates are far, far ahead of even the Ghanaian politicians and the political parties in terms of electoral behavior, in terms of believing that as far as they are concerned, the elections has come of age and that nobody has the right to tamper with their democratic franchise.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Festus Okoye, for your contribution. So let's get the views of the High Commission of Ghana to Nigeria, His Excellency William Kainrige. There were heightened sense of fear just before the elections. Why was this so, as to what we saw in previous elections where, you know, everything was just calm? And then my colleague here just asked a question now, a political party declaring itself as a winner even before the result was announced. What implication did that have?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I would like to thank my two brethren. I share entirely the views they have expressed in terms of what happened in Ghana. But let me say this, that in addition to what they just said, I'm looking at the Ghanaian election from the different departments. It will be the same in Nigeria. In our elections, you have the spiritual department, you have the psychological department, where the two competing parties have PSYOPs, psychological warfare, which relates to the question you just asked in terms of the perception of heightened situation. You have what I would call the organizational department, how each party will organize itself, first internally, and second externally in relation to the other party and in relation to the electorate, very key. And as they said earlier, the electorate is getting more and more sophisticated when you observe the different elections that have taken place in the past. And I put it in the larger context of Africa, that if we are to look at things correctly, as some of our leaders have said, both in Ghana and Nigeria, our history matters. What happens before informs the present and the future. And so the previous electoral experience in Ghana has been a build-up, particularly from 1992, based on the constitution, the opening up into multi-party democracy, the various reviews that have taken place on the side of the Electoral Commission, working closely, by the way, with INEC of Nigeria. We have mutually been reinforcing each other all the way, and more closely than some people may see, and the support, complementary support of our partners. And so before the election, there was this heightened thing because of the psychological warfare. But if you recall, when we had this Skype interview when I went to vote, I was saying that our elections were likely to be one of the best in our history because of what went on before. On the side of the Electoral Commission, on the side of the security agencies, on the side of the political parties who sometimes came under a lot of flack. But the parties have done quite some work internally, and intra-party democracy is going to be critical moving forward in Africa. And I had the privilege of traveling from the north to the south. On each time I had the opportunity to go for an official assignment. And you could see clearly that the elections were being campaigns were being conducted in an atmosphere of calmness, unlike before. This taunting of each other when one party is having its campaign to the point of violence, I didn't see that, from my personal observation. And so because of the preparations that went on, and because of what I personally experienced, I was confident that this election was going to be much better than before. And I think that in the history of Ghana's election, this will go down as one of the freest, most highly competed for and peaceful in the country.
All right.
High Commissioner, just before we bring in Ezenwa, when we had you via Skype from Accra, I asked a question, but perhaps we were pressed for time to sidestep the question. I asked if change was in the air.
I was not about to answer that question for obvious reasons. I don't have an official
you don't want to lose your job.
Well, it's not about losing the job, but in terms of public service decency, I could not have commented on that. But change, I'll answer the question now, given the time.
After the fact.
Thank you, after the fact. Change was in the air and not in the air, and I'll explain why. It is part of the sophistication of this particular election in Ghana. We are beginning to establish in Ghana an 8-year changeover from one ruling party to the other. It started in 2000. In Nigeria, it started in 2015, last year. And but the complication of this particular election is that the ruling party had its presidential candidate doing a first term, which means 4 years. The main opposition party was able to work out psychologically for people to look at it as ruling party doing 8 years and not a first term president, with the argument that the candidate of the ruling party had been vice president and an NDC president also. Yeah, so yes, change was in the air, because when you look at the outcome of the voting, you can see that the voice of the people has been an emphatic need for change. And that is the rhythm that is picking up in Ghana, the 8-year turnaround.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. But then very quickly, we're pressed for time. What's your perception? What was your view of the Ghana election as compared to what we've had here in the past?
Well, I was looking out for some takeaways, what we could take away, because right now we're doing some work around electoral amendment. I'm excited about the early voting for election officials. I mean, people who were working at elections, the police, observers, media people who voted on Wednesday and even got an extension up to Thursday. I'm excited about that. We could find how to infuse that, because really a great percentage of our citizens don't vote during elections because they're at work. That's some good point that we can take away. We can also begin to look at our political parties. In 2012, I was in Ghana, and if you took a taxi or you were at a hotel, the waiter in the hotel or the taxi man educates you in terms of, his stand on his own political party. And it was not something, we need to begin to look at our political parties. What kind of political parties do we run? You know, I think that would be helpful. For me, that's one good point. Political consciousness, social mobilization, the Ghanaians are just far away from. But there's a reform opportunity for us. We can mainstream those things into our voting system.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll still retain you, but we'd like to, in the meantime, thank the High Commissioner of Ghana to Nigeria, His Excellency William Azuma Kanyerige. Your Excellency, thank you for being part of our discussion in our studios this morning.
Thank you.
All right. We also would like to thank our correspondent, Muhammad Ali. That's not the boxer, by the way. That's the correspondent. He covered the elections for us in Ghana. Muhammad Ali, thank you for being with us at the discussion segment today.
Kinsley, can I just comment on the early election?
No, well,
we're pressed for time.
We're pressed for time now because we're having to go over now to the Gambia issue, which is a matter we're bringing in Ambassador Joe Keshi, retired permanent secretary from our Lagos Network studios, to join this conversation, but that will be after this short break.
Would you like some water? It's cold, especially for you.
Which era are you living in? We have a fridge.
When everything else in your house is from the present, then why are your toilet cleaning methods from the past? Harpic, all-in-one for you. Compared to other toilet cleaners, Harpic removes top stains, kills all germs, and removes bad odors for a shining, clean, and fresh toilet.
Wow.
You should also take the Harpic
all-in-one challenge.
Shaman or for shaman. Oh, let me wash your hand for you. Let me take toothpick and... Hey. According to Professor, tranquilizer.
I am disappointed, aghast, crestfallen, and vanquished at your shameful display.
This week on your award-winning comedy series, Professor John Bull, starring Kanayo Okanayo, Mercy Johnson, Queen Wokoye, Yomi Fash Lanso, Ogus Baba.
I'd like to see Mr. Udo Eto.
I hear you now, but find me something.
Are you mad?
Go.
Goodness, August, you show and your shit.
Oh.
Very nice man, generous.
Okay, anything for the guests. Maybe feature or something.
Happy weekend, sir.
Thank you.
Today is Wednesday.
Professor John Bull, this Tuesday and Friday, 8:30 to 9 p.m. on NTA Network, International, and Star Times.
I'm finished.
Who finished you?
Find me something.
Over and out.
Welcome to the new speed of life.
All right, you're welcome back now. Just before we get into the discussion segment proper of the Gambia election, let us play back a report by our correspondent, Oyemi Ajayi, who put this together when things began to, as it were, melt down in the Gambia on the heels of the president making an announcement. Let's get it from here.
The Almighty Allah. Hello? Are you hearing me? I wish you all the best. The country will be in your hands in January, and you are assured of my guidance on your transition. I don't mean selecting who becomes member of government, but you have to work with me as I pack to go to Kanila, so that I hand over the State House to you. You are the elected president of the Gambia, and I wish you all the best. I have no ill will, and I wish you all.
Those were the initial words of President Yahya Jammeh of Gambia, conceding defeat to the opposition leader, Adama Barrow. Barely a week after conceding defeat, he tends to be singing a different song by outrightly rejecting the election results due to what he claims to be irregularities from the country's electoral commission.
I want to make it very clear that in the same way that I accepted faithfully the results, believing that the IEC was independent and honest and reliable, I hereby reject the results in totality. I will not accept the results based on what has happened.
Adama Barrow's victory gave Gambians reasons to heave a sigh of relief.
All right, thank you very much, Oyemi Ajayi, for that report. Joining us from our Lagos Network Center to discuss this is Ambassador Joe Keshi. He was a former permanent secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Thank you very much for coming on the program.
Thank you. Good morning.
With us is one here in the studio, and we also have with us Festus Okoye in our Kaduna Network Center.
All right, well, let's quickly return to Lagos. Ambassador Kashi, if we can see you on the split screen. Ambassador Kashi, hello? Hello? So, we had you in the studios last week when that hello call was made, and then, of course, you are seeing the other side. What's your take on this?
Well, Kingsley, you know, the last time we discussed this, we all applauded the situation in the Gambia, and we thought it was good not only for the Gambia but for the continent. Perhaps we spoke too soon, and I must be frank with you that when I saw the clips, it just showed of President Jamel accepting defeat. There was something worrisome about the whole, should I say, body language of the president. So, frankly, I wasn't surprised that he did a reversal. But my take is that this is a time for the continent, ECOWAS, Nigeria in particular, to act. You remember the last time I was in your studio in Abuja, I did express the hope that the Nigerian government will get involved in this transition, and there was no time for us to expatiate why I took that position. Bear in mind that Gambia has never had a transition. This is the first transition that they're going to have. And as the elected president, as the incoming president, hopefully incoming president said, both he and Jamil, they are the children of independence. And it's appealing to Jamil that as children of independence, they should be the first to conduct the first historic transition in the Gambia. But one of the reasons why I did make that proposal was my realization that Gambia has never had a transition and they needed to be guided, both Jamel and the incoming president. Having said that, we must also understand what has transpired since the election. Number one, the emerging threat from some opposition leaders to expose or to put Jamel, under investigation or arrest. I think that was immature to start with, and I think it was a grave mistake that probably frightened the man and his supporters. And we must bear in mind the people around the president at times like this, because not only is the president afraid to go, those who have been with him perpetrated the evil and who think that they might be caught in the crossfire post-election are equally afraid to want to leave the scene. So the whole idea that we must assist Gambia to transit properly, I think I'll return back to that to say Nigeria must get involved. We must send envoy to both the new incoming president and to Jamel and begin to appeal to them that they should allow the election to stand. Under no circumstances must any reversal be allowed. And I think that's what the international community is also saying.
All right, thank you very much, Ambassador Joe Keshi. Mr. Festus Okoye is in Kaduna for us. You are a lawyer. What is the implication of this decision that the president has taken?
Well, for me, the new stand of Yahya Jammeh should not be allowed to stand. It is dangerous for the sub-region, it is dangerous for the African continent, and also it's dangerous for democratic growth. I believe that he was defeated in a free and fair elections, and he acknowledged defeat, and that the election in which he lost was free, fair, and transparent. He must not be allowed to engage in any form of reversal. And I think I agree with the ambassador that what he's playing out is that the man is just frightened and wants to be reassured that if he willingly relinquishes power, that no harm will come to him. But unfortunately for him, I think that after 22 years in power, he has done so much harm to the people of Gambia, also done so much harm in the area of human rights. And I think that for him to begin to grandstand and want to also continue in a direction that will lead to a humanitarian tragedy in the Gambia is really unfortunate. Now, if you look at the constitutive instruments of the African Union and also of ECOWAS, what he has done amounts to unconstitutional change of government. This is because if you look at the ECOWAS protocols and also the supplementary protocols, as well as the African Union Charter on elections and governance, you will see that refusal to hand over power after a democratic elections amounts to an unconstitutional takeover of government, and it attracts immediate sanctions. I think that for me, as Ambassador Keshi pointed out, what should be done at this moment is for the African Union and the ECOWAS to activate its own mechanisms, like activating the Council of the Wise in relation to the African Union and the Council of Elders in relation to the other regional body, and send a high-powered mission to the Gambia to tell Jammeh that what he has done will not be allowed to stand, and that by January he must hand over power to the duly elected government in the Gambia, and also to draw his attention to the various sanctions that have been provided for in the ECOWAS Charter and also the protocols and supplementary protocols, as well as that of the African Union, which also entails that if he goes on with what he's doing, no other African country or even any country within the sub-region will offer him an asylum, and that any country where he runs to, that country is under an obligation to extradite him or under an obligation to also try him. But I think that, as the ambassador pointed out, the political parties in the Gambia should tone down on their rhetorics about trying him, and then reassure him that even if he's going to be tried, he will be given fair hearing and all the due process rights will be accorded to him. But whether he can remain in power beyond January, I think that both Nigeria, the ECOWAS, and the African Union should not allow this to stand, because that will be a very bad democratic behavior for the people of the Gambia.
All right, Festus Okoye, thank you very much. Now, very quickly, Ezenwa Nwagu. Ezenwa Nwagu, you listen to both Ambassador Joe Keshi and Festus Okoye. What's your take on the seeming vindictiveness in African politics? I mean, you have a new party that sweeps into office, and then the next thing is you start hounding your opponents who were in office before. And is that also a sufficient justification for seeking a soft landing? I mean, even after the former government had committed all kinds of atrocities, as alleged in the case of Yahya Jammeh.
Well, in the particular case of Gambia, I don't think Yahya Jammeh should be in the position to determine what happens. If you've committed any crime, it is not to blackmail people into giving you soft landing. It is to also own up to the fact that there are things that you have done, and you have to face the music. I don't particularly agree with the narrative of hounding, because the truth of the matter is that in many cases, especially in Africa, people who are in power run on the stream of impunity. And because they are in power, they don't seem to realize that a day like this will come in which they will have to give account. And so if the succeeding government decides to go the whole hog in doing that, this whole talk about giving a soft landing, in my view, is part of why impunity reigns. People commit crimes and hope that they can negotiate their way out of that challenge. But beyond that, I think that the civil society in Nigeria and civil society across Africa should give solidarity to the Gambian people at this time. In whichever way possible we can do it, we should be able to organize a peaceful protest to the Gambian embassy in Nigeria with a strongly worded letter to say, look, we solidarize with the Gambian people. We wish at this point in time, because if there is crisis in Gambia, of course, Nigeria, in its big brother, will bear the brunt of the crisis. We will move in there. So it is important that freedom-loving people across Africa and even in the world bring pressure to bear on the Jammeh at this point in time to respect the wishes of the Gambian people.
All right, Ezenwa Nwagu, thank you very much. Ambassador Joe Keshi, Just one last question to pop to you. There were reports indicating that the ECOWAS chair, who is also the president of Liberia, Ellen Sirleaf Johnson, was denied landing rights in Banjul when she was going in there, and they would say that the entire country probably had been garrisoned. And you heard Mr. Festus Okoye there also talking about a trigger for all kinds of protocols. Now, from a diplomatic perspective, is this likely to be a long haul? And if so, again, what exactly would you like to see Nigeria do?
Well, it might look like a long haul if ECOWAS, Nigeria in particular, and Senegal do not show considerable leadership on this issue. And let me just say to the young man there who said civil society, look, let's forget the civil society for the time being. Even in Nigeria here, the civil society have gone virtually silent, you know, and I don't see the impact they will make on this Gambian crisis. What we need is a well-articulated diplomatic push, which includes the threat of sanctions against the Gambia. For me, I just think that the ECOWAS leadership, the Nigerian leadership, and the Senegalese leadership, obviously because of the closeness of Senegal and the fact that Senegal has a considerable influence on the Gambia. And I think the three should work hand in hand and mount a serious diplomatic pressure on Jamel to leave. And if he refuses, they should also go ahead and begin to think of imposing sanctions and getting the international community, particularly the UN, to support them. And I'm sure they'll be able to get that easily because the international community has really been furious and angry at the new position of President, Jamel. Look, let me also make this point very clear because of the question you asked the gentleman at the studio. The point is, when you look at someone who has spent 20 years in power and has just been defeated in an election, you have to handle him very carefully to ease him out. He still has the command of the military. And bear in mind that the military under him were created only when he came to power. And so their loyalty is to the president in power. And when you begin to hear the chief of army staff, expressing support for the sitting president, you have a crisis. So these are things that needs to be, cleverly, diplomatically managed in a way that you persuade both parties, not only to be patient, but to see how they can manage Jamil out of power. Protests, threats, by the opposition will not help. First of all, grab power first before you begin to think of what to do to the man. That's my position, because he has the military, he has the police, he has all the apparatus of power on his side. And the opposition, if you know the Gambia very well, these are very easygoing people. I don't think they're just going to jump onto the street and begin to protest. No, they will not. That's not their lifestyle. But we need to help them to go through this, crisis situation.
All right, thank you very much, Ambassador Joe Keshi. Thank you for joining us in this discussion on the Gambia elections. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We also want to thank our constitutional lawyer, Mr. Festus Okoye. Thank you very much for your thoughts and time.
Thank you very much.
And finally, Mr. Ezenwa Nwagu, Chairman, Partners for Electoral Reforms. Thank you for coming and good morning, Nigeria.
Thank you. Good morning.
All right, sir. We'll take a sports segment and we'll be back.
The 2015-2016 Nigeria